a podcast logo featuring a stick person figure wielding a hammer, breaking a cracked tragedy theatre mask on a microphone stand. Sound wave symbols emanating from the words breaking barriers, accessibility in action. The colour scheme is black and purple.
Hey, it's Paul here, and I've got another conversation in the Breaking Barriers series. This one is called Breaking Education, and it's with a good friend of mine, Joe England. If you don't know Joe, he is an amazing teaching artist and theatre maker, and Joe does a lot of work with autistic learners, working within the special educational needs settings. Joe was very kind to sit and share some ideas around his practice, and really enjoyed some of the conversations we had around the use of space and really the non-negotiable value of space. But also, not surprising to me, but Joe's work is absolutely anchored in a person-centric, learner-centric methodology, which is all about meeting people where they are and giving them the best opportunity to thrive in their own way and find value in all things that they do. So Joe speaks to this far better than I do, so allow me just to set the context. In this video, I'm sat to the left, I'm wearing a burgundy polo shirt, I'm a white male with short brown hair, and to the right is Joe. He'll give an introduction shortly, and we're sat very close and cozy on a small black sofa. But with that, let's get on with the conversation. Breaking Education. We're up and running.
Great.
I'll come and sit with you. I don't know how close are we? We're a bit close in this cozy sofa, aren't we?
This is good.
Brilliant. We'll start then. Welcome to Breaking Barriers. I'm really excited. We've got Joe England with me today, who I think I can call you my friend.
Yes, definitely. You can definitely call me your friend.
And we're going to be talking a bit about education, arts education, and all those wonderful things about how we create more access to arts education and community arts. But Joe, could you just introduce yourself and do a self-description?
Sure. So I'm Joe England, and I'm a theatre practitioner and theatre maker. And today I'm wearing a grey polo shirt. I quite often wear something a bit more lively, but I don't know why I've got this one on today. Some
calming.
kind of grey shorts. And I mean, I'm continuing the theme with some grey socks and some grey trainers, but it's a warm day in London, so
you're enjoying the trying to stay cool.
Yes,
brilliant.
Totally.
Thanks, Joe.
Right.
So big question to kick starters was we were just chatting about this before I hit record, but the idea of these conversations are like, how can we break things or dismantle things to make them better? And I know you've just done you've got so much experience. But for you, what do you think we need to do to make arts education more inclusive?
I think quite a lot of it's about spaces. So my thing that at the moment is really how theatre is really the manipulation of space. So I think if we could work towards creating spaces within schools that are, instead of it being a sideline, we could convert this classroom, or maybe we'll do some drama in this classroom. If we could have dedicated spaces, even if that is an extra expense, I just feel like the importance of being free in those spaces and trying to move away from being like contained in the classroom, for want of a better word probably,
locked into the classroom.
Locked into the classroom is, and also even down to like a hall. So I've had experiences where you've got the hall booked, because I do a lot of prep before my workshops, like where's it going to be, what's the space going to be like and stuff. And there might be like some chairs set out because there's going to be a guest speaker coming in the hall, or there's an assembly. And I'm already sort of scanning the space going, well, how many of these chairs can I now take out to create the space that I kind of need? And within that space is going to be the expression that we're hopefully going to kind of explore. And I think being in that kind of almost being pushed to the side, not always, but sometimes being pushed to the side, it just creates a challenge. I'd say half the challenge is if I get booked for something and I'm going into an educational space, not necessarily institutions that are arts based because they might have a bit more awareness of it, but in some school settings, half my battle, and I say this to kind of younger practitioners, is half of it's the work, half of it's that communication with the school and making sure that everything's how you need it. Because you need to be settled to bring the best out of the learners. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, I just think why it's great having conversations is because in my mind, which happens all the time, I'm forming like I've got an idea for a question and I'm thinking about what you might answer.
Yeah.
I can't help it. And what's interesting, I wouldn't have immediately gone, even though I've worked with you quite a bit when we was playing out in Singapore for a while. But it's that you went to the physical space.
Yeah.
It just already reminds me of like just to think slightly different, because I suppose I'm going straight to the plan or the practice in a very kind of literal sense of the flow.
Sure.
And I just love that, of course, your work is absolutely anchored in the right space and the right physical environment to then build on for the learner to come in.
I think so. I mean, obviously it depends on the learners, but you could sort of, so I'll give an example. So I was doing a project in London and we were put into a computer room. And this was with a autistic spectrum condition group. Primarily that was their kind of learning need. Yeah. And I, as a starting point, there's so many there's challenges there for, neurotypical people that I might want to go on the computer more. I might want to, but the distraction within that space. You can do it, can't you? Well, I probably could, because I could think of a way maybe we could do a scene. We could use the computers, but what I want to do is a different type of developmental sort of set of work. So I can't be, you can be challenged, but we want to try and create the best for the group. So I think that initial start is quite key. That first few minutes of a session, I think, is really important.
When a computer room is not going to cut it.
Going to cut it, really. No. And I think you can do it, but I think we're striving, aren't we, hopefully, for something. And there's probably quite a simple fix that might not take too many people too long, but it's about the commitment to that. Yeah. Like, can we all help to do it? We probably can, but wouldn't it be great if the first 10 minutes isn't moving the stuff? Sounds like really simple, basic things, but could we get some staff to help for that 10 minutes instead of something else? Because we want to prioritise where we could get to in this quite short time, and we need those things in place.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think having seen you work, I see how there's many benefits to having that good start and that clear space. Do you think then, have you seen in your experience over a few years, is that commitment to offering the right space initially more there and more available to you,
or has it gone back?
Because you hear a lot of people talking about there's a bit of regression in the space. Do you feel that?
I think so. I think the priority in the school could be lower down potentially, and it might not be even almost the school's fault. It's where the priorities are lying in what they need to teach on the curriculum and things like that. And therefore you'll get one, and you'll have experienced it too, you'll get spaces where there is a fantastic space and the school is really proud of that space, and if you can get it, if it's not been booked out, you could use it. And that comes with some of its own challenges, because it's quite often a bit of a tangent, but that not everyone knows how to use all the wonderful equipment, and there's a sort of almost like, now we've created a sort of stage space or a playing space that's more for performance rather than just play. You almost behave in a different way, and that behaviour might not be what I'm trying to explore. And there's a sort of, that's the drama, and you'll get these preconceived ideas from other people that, that's what's going on over there.
Right, okay.
And I don't think that might not be useful for what I want to try and achieve.
So kind of a misunderstanding of, it has to look a certain way in a certain space. And we've spent money doing that. So use this over here.
Exactly.
And almost that's kind of counterproductive to what you want.
And
you do, I remember years back, I mean, I've not been teaching up in the Northwest for a long time now, but there were a moment of investment in creative pop-up immersive. Like rooms for creativity. And gadgets and touch screens and that happened, didn't it? I don't know if they've ever. I think they probably all died a death.
I don't think there's much going on. Unfortunately.
So we went. Do you think maybe is there a moment that you can think of a project where you've seen the best possible setup and space, and has that come primarily from you, or have you found like, wow, actually no, this school were ready for me, they surprised you almost?
I think so. I think we have booked the hall and it's the smaller hall that you requested because I don't want the space necessarily to be too expansive.
Yeah.
And they've done it. They've been true to their word. So then I know, say it's an 8-week sort of one afternoon a week for 8 weeks. I know that space is familiar for the learners and me.
Yeah.
So I know how I'm going to set it up each time. And when the learner comes into the space, they're aware of it. It's not a change.
Yeah.
And it's not all just about, the change might sort of discombobulate someone. It's more just for everyone, I think, that time is quite precious and we want to get the best work in that time. So we all know how it starts. We know we're already starting on a strong base. We don't have to sort of unravel 5-10 minutes before we can get to the kind of core of what we want to do. Yeah. So it doesn't even have to be a sort of sophisticated space. It just needs to be a safe space, as in the actual objects in the space and enough room to play. Yeah. And just a bit of a commitment to it, because I think everybody feels that, don't they, when they go in, that so many sort of, like invisible PR kind of stuff, where I remember working for an arts institution and I was going there regularly, and the day that I got a pass, that I got kind of like, I didn't have to sign in every time, and I got a bit of money off in the canteen, I felt as a freelancer really part of it. Yeah. And it made a difference. It genuinely made a difference. I thought, I want to, yes, I'm freelance, but I'm being treated like I'm sort of part of the team, even though I choose to be on this edge because I like that, because I like the variety, but I still valued that I was valued. Yeah. And I think even in that short space of time, although I totally understand there's so many other things going on in the schools, I just think if you can get that, if you go in and there's challenges straight from the off, you've got to almost get yourself ready. Yeah. And then you've got to be on good form really to get a good session. Or you're sort of masking a bit otherwise, because I think you're on show a bit. Yeah. You just are with how you're trying to get things from people.
There's an extra bit of, I suppose, vulnerability.
Yeah.
And so if you've not got all your things lined up how you need them, you're going to have to, like you say, mask a bit more. To kind of. And there might be a lot of things you're trying to be responsive to anyway.
Yeah, sure. And I'm not saying that you need like cotton wool around you, because everybody has that in their job. But I feel like for that 2 hours, what's great about it almost, and how it's different to some kind of teaching, is that you can give. I'll come out of that space feeling quite exhausted often. Yeah. Some people might be like, well, maybe you need to be a bit more relaxed. But the type of work that I'm referring to here, really, mainly with sort of autistic learners, is multi-layered in choosing hopefully the right tool in that moment. Yeah. So you're sort of intensely, you are quite fatigued cognitively, because you're sort of tuning into lots of frequencies. I'm sure. And I think more with mixed cohorts now as well, you're like, you can't use the same sort of tool for each learner. So if you've got 12, you're kind of on these 12 channels, hopefully, if you're doing it effectively. Yeah. Yeah.
Talk more to that, Joe, because I know you talk about your Joe England drama and autism work. Yeah. And that's one part, a big part of your work. Sure. How would you describe that methodology or that practice?
I think that's going to kind of, because I can see into the future about some of the questions, but I think that what's nice about it, hopefully that work is that everything feeds in to each other. All the work strands kind of feed in, and I'll use similar games and exercises. So on one day, I might be working with a group of, I don't know, maybe 13-year-old young people with autism, and then I might be working at the Manchester School of Theatre with BA in acting graduates, and some of those graduates might have autism as well. But the crossovers, I could use some of the same games and exercises, and I'll dial them in different ways. Yeah. And sometimes I'll be really surprised with either group. And I think my methodology is just around people. And like,
make it sound very simple.
Yeah.
Just look at the person.
Just look at the person and the space again. So I think and also I'd learned something from a writer called Alistair McDowell. We did a show, he wrote a show for National Theatre Connections, right. Zero for the Young Dudes, which was a great play. And he spoke to all the directors on the sort of NT Weekender. And he came out really openly with, I write to brief. So his brief was, this is a youth theatre show.
Yeah.
I want it to connect with the young people. It needs to be a certain length, and it needs to have a certain sort of style to facilitate, to allow directors of all experience to kind of make it work.
Yeah.
And I loved that honesty. I try and take that with me. So my brief is, this is the group I'm working with, this is what I want to try and get to. But a lot of my methodology could work with all the groups.
Yes.
But I do love this idea of the space and what's coming alive in that moment, because with one group it might be that we're devising something and we're going to take it out into a little street theatre performance, and we're making that space in the street. We're manipulating that space in the street. Or I might be in, say it is a classroom, we've been able to clear it, I'm manipulating the space within that classroom in that moment. So for example, in Singapore, when we were in a classroom and I did a kind of little sort of journey really for the group around taking off in a rocket and ending up in space and kind of being this gravity free. So there's a lot of things, there's imagination, there's physicality, there's kind of like structure, and there's a change between, you know, the rocket and then this kind of physical change when there's no gravity. And it's complex, but there's kind of lots going on. I think we hopefully manipulated that space. However close we got for an audience, it doesn't look much like space. For us, it was in that time. And that before was a classroom with tables and someone writing on a whiteboard. So I think that manipulation in space is happening in all the moments. And that's what performance is for me.
Yeah. I mean, Joe, I do really find it fascinating listening to you talk. It's very exciting. And I'm just thinking about that work. I know I was talking to Tiffany Yu about anti-ableism and barrier removal, and you know how we make that much more both kind of an accessibility and anti-ableist attitude, and how those two things interact. And as you're talking, then I'm just making that connection to like you meeting people exactly where they are and facilitating the space and the people there in a way that's nothing about making anyone do anything that you think they should do, or you're not putting anything on them. Your expectation is not you must perform this way. You're actually doing what I feel like is a very anti-ableist approach, which is we're making sure there's as many barriers removed from this space and actually giving that person everything they need to succeed for them. Would that be like a good way of
definitely? So a good one for that, I think, when you sort of, because I don't always think about what the process is, but the more I'm doing it, I'm hopefully seeing what, because obviously one size doesn't fit all, but I'm sort of seeing where it's really typical of my whole being, which is basically sort of, it's a game of sort of trying stuff and a bit of busking and a bit of sort of like, I'm going to give it a go, and then I'm going to kind of, things will happen, and then I'll probably learn and hopefully improve, which I suppose is a bit of a way of trying to live a life. But in this work, I just try and sort of then home it. And I think because I've been doing it for a long time, some of it is very structured, but then I can play within that because I know what it is. So I suppose it must be what it must be like, amazing to play an amazing instrument. You've got all that training, but when you're free with it, that's when the magic happens. But I'm not saying it's always magic, but I think having that, but a good example would be the Discovery Box game. So a game, just to describe it, where you've got a box, you open it up and you imagine taking something out the box. And I could do that game in so many different ways to sort of just allow that learner, hopefully, what's best for that learner. So it could be that the learner can do it completely independently, or it could be that I have, say, a board maker sheet, so that's like a mechanism of symbols to kind of follow which suggest ideas. So that could be a version. Or another version could be, which I've done fairly recently, is to actually put that learner's favourite object in the room in the box. It's a ball or it's a whatever. And if that's been sort of almost agreed with the staff that that's okay, and that is a sort of a developmental area that staff would like to work on, then that could be the win. Like that could be the achievement for that young person in that moment, and that is a step further than maybe what had happened before. It might have happened before, but what I'm trying to get going is this is the structure and this is the task. So I suppose if you're trying to follow sort of tasks, and quite often there might be sort of like developmental points of learning that the school is trying to achieve or the institution is trying to achieve, then this might be a way of getting there. And then it could work on many different levels, because the next time perhaps the learner thought that the object would be there, it's not, and they've imagined it this time.
Yeah.
And people will be surprised that they sometimes, I don't think that'll happen, but occasionally it does. So something's happened.
Yeah.
And
I'm very fortunate I can sit here chatting to you today, having witnessed your practice in
Yeah.
action.
Yeah.
And I know you've had many of these situations, but I remember one particular situation where a learner was choosing, quite rightly, to not engage.
Yeah.
Or not to be seemingly traditionally engaged.
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
But then as you went back, I think over 2 or 3 sessions, that learner did choose to step in
Yeah.
and interact, effectively or reasonably within the tasks, the structures that you'd set up.
Yeah.
And I think that's also just so refreshing to know that that, I suppose, unapologetic flexibility that you have in that space of you do you when you're ready to do you.
Yeah.
And I've seen that happen in a couple of moments with the work that we did together.
Yeah.
It's just fantastic to see it happen.
Yeah, thank you. I think that sort of, as part of the almost like the challenge of it, and also the sort of enjoyment of it, I think, is that have you selected the right tools to kind of, and what are you, and sometimes, so you're not making assumptions, you're just trying to facilitate it, I think.
Yeah. Maybe, Joe, talk a little bit, because I know and actually I don't know too much about you as a performer.
Yeah.
As an actor. I suppose as a director, actor, performer. Yeah. How does that shape this work for you?
I think I've always liked improvising. So, and I almost liken it to like running with weights.
Okay.
In that, if you're improvising with someone else who's a really good improviser, actually sometimes that can be amazing, because you're really both sparking together, but also you can almost like outdo it. There's that, you have to do that sort of like sitting in and not the sort of trying to topper each other, like
it's
almost like
challenges to that.
Different challenges to that. But also, if someone isn't as experienced in whatever form we want to look at that in, but basically trying to create a new world, I guess, and imagine that we're in another space, then I think some of the improvisational work in some of my SEN workshops is really interesting for me, because I'm trying to think of what would be the best thing to sort of say or do safely to sort of draw out the best in this person.
Yeah.
So it might be something that I'd spotted before. So it could be the window into, I heard someone sing before. So in this improv, I'm going to steer it towards them potentially being a singer, so that we can then hear them sing again, so we can celebrate that beautiful skill. Yeah. And that might not have come out otherwise. It might just be the setting that brings it out, just as an example. Or I know that there's a particular, so if it's a challenge to get someone up, but I know that someone said to me, oh, they love Star Wars, then I'm just going to go for it. I'm not going to be hidden behind, but they might always talk about Star Wars. For me, in that moment, that's okay, because instead of not engaging, they're engaging. Yes, they're doing their own thing, but is this the first step on the ladder? Yeah. That later we can add another one and another one. And that might not, in some cases, it doesn't shift. It's just the condition has brought that
and they're
challenge.
They're going to stay there with that.
And that's it. But I'm equally, hopefully, going to go, great, let's nurture that one then, you know. I would do some of that with a little caveat, I think, if we're talking about sort of things for artists and teachers and practitioners, that I'd like to find out a bit maybe about it. So if it's a longer project, because some developmental areas might be that the trying to actually move the learner from this fixation of something. Okay. So if I'm adding even more onto it, we've got to weigh up what's what. You're
not working against the teacher's outcomes.
Yeah. Not working.
Please, Joe.
Yeah, can
no
you not?
Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly. And then I might discuss it a bit, though I might say, well, what about these bits? And then, but I would always sort of, I think I probably got caught out once where it was a different type of group, but I maybe didn't consider external things. So say you're working with a group and there's just been a break time.
Okay.
and perhaps you might be working with more challenging behaviours.
Yep.
I didn't know what had happened in the break, so I feel like the staff you should take their guidance, and then maybe you could unpick it later and take some more risks later, because you don't want to get caught out that you're doing something against. So you got to be a bit careful of how maverick you're being, I suppose.
It's huge, doesn't it? I mean, as you say, it's so much to think about, and you're really and I suppose as someone who, I suppose, performers, I mean, I haven't performed in the traditional sense of on a stage for a long time, but within the training of being a performer, the idea of that awareness of kind of readiness, I imagine for you that training is only sharpened as a result of being in these spaces and as being a practitioner.
I feel like if I did some acting now, I think, and I hope, I'd be better than I was. Just because I feel like there's a sharpness probably just around the whole world of that communication. That is exactly what you're doing. You're playing roles throughout the whole thing. You're being you. I was speaking to another staff member at one of the drama schools about sort of trying to be your authentic self. Slight tangent, but I think relevant, is that in our in the drama school settings now, if they're university based, and often now because of the funding and the fees, there's a sort of, instead of it being more like a conservatoire training, it's more of a university training where the finances kind of play quite a big part, and I understand that, and obviously that goes across the arts, but there's almost an expectation from the learner that they're going to walk away, from the student, that they're going to walk away with a ready-made kit of being an actor,
right?
And they want to have like almost like the kit bag, like I've done this, and I just don't think that's what this form of art is. And that also almost crosses over to maybe a teacher might be like, I'd like to see that and that just might not happen.
A bit of a checklist mentality.
Checklist mentality. So it's not all across the board. These are just things of thinking about how things are changing, I suppose. And I, if you get some feedback of, I'd like to walk out of the session having really learned something, I do get that with probably, I know nothing about physics, but let's say, I don't know, where there's something tangible. Something tangible. But in this, becoming an artist and trying to work out what you might want to be in the space, we don't know. That's not to excuse like poor teaching. It's more like, this is the provocation. I like provocations. I like provocations with students. I like provocations even in, I say even, I don't really mean it that way. I just mean in an SEND setting, I like to set the bar as high as I could, in that this provocation could be quite interesting. So for example, you might do a classic with a ball, where when you've got the ball, like a circle time exercise, when you've got the ball, you can speak, because turn taking could be a challenge, and actually your moment, I think the learner's moment is really important. So I do often start with a question that goes round, and it might take quite a while, but at least at the beginning everyone's communicated. So even in the circumstance of a non-verbal learner, there would have been some interaction between myself, the group, and this particular learner, like a sort of engagement in the space, I guess. And I started using, I've used a plain ball, but I've also used a ball which is the globe of the world, and it will bring a totally different challenge, because this object might have all the countries, and you might get something like the discovery might be around this, and I might feel like one day I want the plain ball and another day I want the other ball, because I think there's still something there. There's still something. It's not a checklist, it's what happens. And that's that. We'll talk a little bit about you, maybe challenges that teachers offer you. But just to close that bit, I just think it's interesting, you as a director as well. Because that's almost, again, you talked about, you're the facilitator. And in some ways that is the director's role in a rehearsal room, is to manage the space in a way that gets what they need from people in a way that hopefully is useful for the performers, and again, not too I'm sure there's lots of ways of directing, but not too kind of, you must do it like this, but we want to see what we can get, what can we create in this space together today. Definitely. I think that I heard quite recently someone say, there's like a professional job, the process was so difficult, so challenging, but the show was great, which is good for the audience and might be good if that's the end game, that's the brief,
Yeah.
the 5-star review.
That's what you were all aiming for.
Yeah. But in some settings, and probably all the ones I work in, actually the facilitation around almost that sort of like bringing the best out of the group, because there's a lot of other things going on, is probably what's going to lead towards the most effective performance. And that could be of a very high expectation level, but it's just, I suppose, different to if your brief is that it's a professional job and we have to create in 4 weeks this show that sells this many tickets. That is another different brief.
Yeah, totally.
And there might not be time for some of that, but I still think every space should be. I don't believe personally in that kind of like, you know, it was an old school drama school thing of breaking someone down
Yeah.
to create, strip right back to create. And I think that whole thing's that's just changed anyway, hasn't it, with casting?
Yeah, and I think, you know, as you in a very simple way, the right time. I like what you said about a moment for everyone to communicate and introduce themselves. And just this recently, I was doing some training, and I try and be unapologetic about everyone having a chance to introduce themselves.
Yeah.
And describe that we do self-description and things. Partly that process is about time. For everyone to sit in for a minute and look at each other and just be there and get a moment to introduce in any way they like. You know, some people love spending a lot of time talking about things, others quicken, you know, this is what I want to say. But I think just zooming out a little bit into like the right inclusive space seems like we need much more flexibility to create time for people to, you know, give themselves. And I think actually what you find in day-to-day life is no one really wants to do that. Everyone's very fast. You know, we're instant culture, aren't we? So I think in some ways I also find the inclusive practice that you're talking to is constantly against the grain of a chop social kind of space that we're in.
Definitely. I think going around the group, you know, when you're starting out as a facilitator, you're sort of almost looking at your watch. You kind of know you shouldn't be, but when it's early days of it, you're kind of, I wanted to get onto this, and you might be in a slightly different headspace yourself about what you're trying to create. But actually it could take quite a long time, but that could be the whole of the first session. And I just think you can't shy away from, you've got to have those moments however they present. And even if the how it presents is particular learner, today's not the day that we're going to hear that, but we've got to try. And then what I love about the flexibility is you can adapt, because it's about sort of human behaviors. You can adapt anything, really. It's different to adapting something that's solid.
Right.
This building has to be built with this amount of bricks to this height. If that's the brief, I can't adapt that. But if it's just human behaviors and playfulness, I can probably adapt it. As long as no one's getting hurt, I'm not getting hurt, and everyone's hopefully sort of enjoying it, then I can change it in the moment to what I think is right.
And you
or serves it right.
And how important play is.
Huge.
And I think maybe that's kind of moving into the last part of what we wanted to talk about, was a little bit about the challenges that teachers face. And I wonder if play is a good place to start.
I think it's a great place. I think it's an amazing
It's almost
place.
like a thought about this.
No, I totally think it is, because I think that there is a lot of, I mean, being a parent myself, of children in primary school, so 2 in year 1 and 1 in year 4, the pressures of the curriculum and what's got to be met is, I can see it from the outside, and I can semi-imagine what it's like, but I think not having those moments to play must be the pressure. Again, talking about time, it's so difficult, and I think some people flourish in different ways, and playfulness can really draw that out. And if you don't have time or the circumstances to be able to do that, then that's difficult. And I'll sometimes sort of try and make more playful approaches to say some of the tasks that my children are set. And sometimes I'll be sort of like brought back in my own brain of like, no, that isn't really it. But I do believe that essentially, if you can get some of that into their lives, it will serve really, really well. Because there's following something, and then there's having your own creative thinking.
Yeah.
And I think I'm right in saying we could interview a few CEOs, but I reckon some of that will be on the list.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, just that. And
Yeah.
also communicating.
Yeah.
Just like, I'll be sometimes asked, can you do some interview and skills training, Joe, with, say, some sixth form students in a mainstream setting?
Yeah.
And if I did, I'd probably just play loads of games.
Yeah.
Because the biggest thing will be just being able to communicate, and whatever that communication method is for you. But it's having the confidence, I suppose, or trying to create that confidence.
What we can't give all the answers in
No.
a conversation now, but what's kind of the big things that you, one or two things that you find yourself repeating to teachers in terms of supporting them?
Yeah. Trying to not be fearful, I think. So quite often barriers, there will be barriers, and there won't even be barriers that are intentional, and they'll be almost always coming from a good place, but there'll be a fear that something might go wrong.
Yeah.
And it can occasionally go a little bit wrong, but not as wrong that is significant.
Yeah.
For me so far.
Yeah.
You know. So I think it's worth. I think the risk reward is worth it, as long as it's safe. Obviously, you're not going to do anything. But I think, and I have had many circumstances where there's been a bit of reticence, and then hopefully by the end so this might be just around, I'm not sure the learners are really understanding fully what this is. Could we do a bit more about getting the understanding about it? Of course we can. Let's get a bit more knowledge perhaps about the characters. Say it was about a particular play.
Yeah.
Perhaps there's some anxiety coming from sort of the unknown, but there's also a little bit of try and trust in the process, and I can offer some of that, but also we might get some reward from the unknown with a bit more structure next week. So I'm going to take it on board, but I'm still going to stick to my principles.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then hopefully we can, because I'm not the teacher, and I don't have to deliver that. I'm trying to deliver something slightly different. And more often than not, at the end, it'll be like, oh, I could see what happened.
Yeah. They could get a sense of where you're
where you're going.
Where that reward is.
Yeah, once you get to that end, and hopefully get some along the way as well. And it's not going hugely off, it's just a little bit of checking in. Don't worry, I've also got my eye on that learner at the moment, and I know that they're not engaging quite as much as I hoped. What are the strategies? And also, teachers can help me lots. Examples would be, so that board maker software, so here's a barrier, that board maker software is quite expensive for a freelancer. So I might sort of like communicate with the teacher and say, could you make a forest board maker symbol for me? Could you make and that's another way of almost like everyone, it's all about that collaboration, isn't it? I think that's what a lot of people are looking for. That sort of almost camaraderie of a community.
Yeah. And again, I've seen that with the work you were doing when I was in Singapore, but I've also, I suppose, my work with Singapore Wolf Trap around how we bring teaching artists into classrooms. This in particular was preschool and kindergarten settings. And it's so interesting that the fear of removing physical structure. You talked about the space right at the beginning, and I know sometimes that can be, you'd hope not in a preschool, but even then it can be, but certainly in maybe a primary school, secondary school, structure of desks and chairs create safety in some circumstances. And in some circumstances they're necessary because they might be what the learner needs as well to be kind of,
to have that sort of
the familiarity. But at the same time, many times teachers have said to me, gosh, pushing the tables and chairs back, I didn't think they could ever do that. I didn't think my learners could actually ever respond in the way I've just seen them respond. And I think, so there's got to be a little bit of pushing.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and I think we had a good example in Singapore of a learner who engaged with this, really loved art. And the table and the art materials were where she felt quite comfortable from what we could perceive. But she also did get involved in different ways. So it was actually drawing and painting some of the topics that we were talking about. So it's almost like a bit of the both there. So there's security here, but because this is happening, there's a split. And that I think is quite interesting.
I can tiptoe in.
And maybe one day I might, I think actually one day they did jump in, even if it was for 5 seconds.
They
or
did,
something.
they got right in the middle of it.
Right in the middle of it. So you've got this sort of these two things going on. And I think, again, that's around, so I do part of my methodology. It's not a new one, but I do use quite a lot of masking tape because those sort of my equivalent of the tables is probably a circle.
Yeah.
To return to for sitting down around, or however we can move or stand or whatever suits the learners, to return to an audience line to watch things from and get that sort of space manipulation idea of a theatre, I suppose, and also maybe even a playing space, you know, a stage, or this is stage left, this is stage right. I can tape it down so that learners, that's not a barrier.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter really where you come on from, but if you want to come on from there, you're familiar with that. And I think, so they are my anchors. I think a totally free space can provide challenges too. It might not be the boundaries within which to play, kind of thing.
I think
so a bit of both.
If anyone takes anything from listening to us talk today, Joe, it's masking tape.
Yeah,
I know, but it's one of the things that I've taken. I'd learned about it before I'd ever worked in your workshop. I'd been in your workshop. I'd seen online you were doing that. And I tried to do little bits of it, but then when you did the training with us, and I was just like, this is just fantastic. Like if you was ever, talk about a top tip. Put some masking tape in your bag, and just mark out some simple things in the space. You can just create stuff. And I've tried it without, and I wished I didn't. And that could be a reflection on me, but I do think that sort of almost in your own mind sort of not proves it, but solidifies it for you what it is actually doing, even though it seems like, oh, it's just some tape on the floor. I think there's so many things going on sort of cognitively and us as humans kind of like going through spaces is a challenge. I remember working with some learners and kind of going from the school to like working in a public space and needing to go up escalators, and for some of the learners that was a really big sensory challenge. And it's almost gets not forgotten, but within this sort of safety of a familiar school setting, it's different to bits of the outside world. And if part of the learning is to try and, I mean, it doesn't have to be, but is it maybe that young person wants to have the tools to function more in the outside world, however that's set up, then there are ways that one could help to get there. But I think some of the stepping stones are the physical, like, well, here is the middle of the room, here is the, and in theatre, we're doing that anyway, aren't we? Because we're pointing an audience towards the record player because there's about to be a moment. So we're always sort of signposting where to look. Or we're throwing loads of stuff and you can look wherever you want. It's a little bit of it's the set design of the classroom, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the set design of the classroom, and it's what's exciting, so I might bring in maybe some sensory smell, like it's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, so let's have like a chocolate scent. Half the group, that's horrible. I might not bring it next session, but some might be like, oh, this is really getting me into the space. But I think just trying all those things and also not putting any, I think everyone probably could relate to all of these, maybe more one sense than another, but could relate to all the tapestry, all the layers that are being put in place to create an experience. And I guess that's my favorite type of theatre, I think, as well. I do like stripped back stuff, but I like a lot. So I like sort of almost trying to get to that with people as well.
Completely agree.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and I'm the same. I think the trouble is now I love so much in theatre, and you hear the term total theatre. I do love that idea of like everything being thrown at me. And I don't know if that's just a comment on my attention span.
It could,
but I do enjoy again a feast.
A feast.
And that means that sometimes when I go to theatre and it's a little bit pared back and very simple, not that it's not amazing, but I do have to try and concentrating a little bit more. But like I say, more about me than anything else.
I'm trying to drive myself back down the line of like a black box two-hander kind of play, and I'm just loving it. But I'm finding that. But I like to check in on all these things because I think they can serve the work. Like you might get a beautiful moment out of the most simple prop or something with your learners, or you might be able to strive towards something quite complex that's really engaging the group as well in a new way. Because I do think the attention span is changing, and I do think consuming anything is changing, like we touched upon before.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a new online Instagram sort of drama that's like a TV show. It's like a minute long per episode. I might be slightly misquoting, but I know that there's, you know, the digestibility of that compared to, and even my own brain, I feel like I'm consuming faster. So I'm trying to slow myself down, even in a workshop sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think it's real.
Yeah.
Without going too kind of, I know that's not like the full form of the podcast, but I think cognitive behaviour is part of what we're trying to talk about.
Absolutely. There's another podcast here, Joe.
Yeah.
But we will close up. But I'd love to know, I did say I threatened you with this idea, but
the future.
How would you,
Yeah.
what do you reckon? I mean, I was saying when I off the recording saying like, I got asked to do this over 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I've recently found what I said about the future in 10 years. And I would still stick by that. But what I was saying, quite sad, I don't think many of the ideas in there have actually really taken root.
Yeah.
Which was about really a systemic change in the structures of school and the way we interact with creativity through school.
Yeah.
But what would you, if you could, let's wave the wand for another 10 years, what would you want?
Well, I'm sort of, I was thinking a bit about this. I'm sort of caught between two stools because I would personally like to try and explore technology a little bit more.
Yep.
I touched on it. I got a little bit of a sort of insight into some technology, which was like a sort of harness that you'd put over, almost like a body armor, that you can feel like music vibration through, like really bassy, and I wonder if there's something in sort of sensory experience where we could almost push the envelope a little bit to really, and I think the theatricality of that is quite interesting. So
definitely,
our work could be that we could use something from that world, if that piques our interest. We're talking about maybe sort of total theatre that we were reflecting on before, but also could that be something that, do we embrace that? I think that's one area. Do we really build that world? And obviously communication aids through screen and things like that can really have helped people, but also that thing of sort of, maybe I think you touched upon it, but I could share it now as well, that idea of sort of like the arts and being really at the forefront of education, even if it's just in some schools to start with. I think that would be amazing. I think just some potential models of it to see if it works. And if it doesn't work, okay. Or if it's not for everyone, okay. But I think just casting that net out there to give it a go. And I think if it's done well and it's a pilot and it takes hold, then you've got something that you could go, oh, we could kind of try and maybe roll this out. And I do think that human interaction and sort of, you know, leveler of being in a playful drama space or art space is so important, and probably more important than ever.
Yeah, totally. And I'm already, as you're talking, Joe, we've got another hour of podcasts to do for sure. But I think it's also making sure, I just wanted to like, that integration of the arts in that very intentional way, you come across it happening in maybe more privileged settings, in my experience, and I think the bit that we want, I imagine we share in common, is that to be for everybody, and that it's not a privilege to be able to access a creative education in a really intentional way. And I think that's what I see when you was talking then.
I think having to sort of almost seek it in other areas, which could create quite a lot of expense for parents, or for anyone, not just for parents, is a barrier. That is a barrier. And if the education system is much more kind of academically led and it's about particular subjects, which I do understand, but I think it also really does need other elements, then if you're in the privileged position really to be able to engage in it, but it costs money to do this extracurricular class, then I think that's a challenge, because why should X have it and not, and then there's so many things like that, aren't there? And I suppose it's really also about funneling the resources and the money in the right way. So it's almost back to that shiny drama studio and no one knows how to use the lights or sound desk. Maybe the lights and sound desk potentially isn't really the bit that makes it great. Maybe the money could be invested in a different area. maybe that's bringing people in from, did that equipment cost 2 years worth of bringing in practitioners every month that could really progress the teaching staff and the learners, because they just found something. I want to do that. I want to be a dancer. I want to do physical theatre. Or that puppetry thing just made me go poof.
Yeah.
That's probably stronger than this idea of, oh, well, you're beautifully lit now, so you're going to be a great performer.
Yeah. No, it's completely
Such
agree.
a strange.
No, totally. And you come across it all the time, this idea of what, again, a mainstream expectation of what looks great. And, and it is constantly, I get it, it's constantly at odds with, like you say, the shiny West End musical.
Sure. Yeah, that is what.
That's what we see on the television.
Yeah.
And so, I totally hear that point.
Yeah.
I think it's, sometimes we can just really strip back and simplify those interactions that you've described so brilliantly today.
Yeah.
Joe, thank you so much.
Pleasure, really enjoyed
amazing.
it. Yeah.
And if anyone listens, we'll come back and do another one.
Yeah, great.